Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, Mary Miller and Tiffany Allen of KwikTag by enChoice will join us to discuss payment processing, where it fits into the AP process, and why it is an important addition to the AP automation space. This episode is sponsored by KwikTag, and Tiffany and Mary talk with me about their customers' experiences with adding payment processing, key elements like virtual cards, and the importance of vendor onboarding. Okay, I am here with Mary Miller and Tiffany Allen of KwikTag by enChoice. It's great to have you both with us. I thought maybe we could just start with some introductions. Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jason. We're excited to be here. And my name is Mary Miller. I'm the Director of Marketing and Channel here at KwikTag by enChoice. We're the software division of the organization, and we focus primarily on AP and payment automation. And I personally have been involved in this space since about 1998 when I started as a GP user, and now I get to work with a lot of GP users and partners in the space here at KwikTag. So excited to be here. Thanks for having us, Jason.
Great to have you. And hey, Tiffany.
Hi there. Great to be here. I am a first timer for sure, but I'm a senior account executive at KwikTag. I've been in the Dynamics space for 15 years, focused on automation solutions specific to the Dynamics ERP product lines. And at KwikTag, my responsibility is really helping customers identify what their requirements and needs are and mapping that into one of our automation solutions. So super glad to be here today.
All right. Well, great to have you both. I wanted to maybe start by talking about the connection between payment processing and AP. It's something that certainly I've heard customers talk about, whether there's a connection, whether solutions have payment processing in the context of AP. Mary, can you talk a little bit more about what payment processing really is as it relates to the AP process?
What we, have seen, especially in the last couple of years, is that as many organizations had people that were, transitioning to working remotely or maybe still sending a small segment of the team into the office, what we were finding is that oftentimes that team was very specific to AP because 50% of businesses in the US, even today, continue to write paper checks. And so the cost of that in terms of the time of somebody needing to go in and reviewing and approving and printing and signing and down to the, putting them in the envelope and sticking a mail on it, can be very expensive. This process can average anywhere from $4 to about $20 per check. So the time inconvenience, the risk of fraud, because there's certainly significant fraud elements related to paper checks going out of your office, literally just became a nightmare for many of these organizations, especially as they started working from home. So issuing the payments, payment processing is simply the fact of the process of taking those payments and issuing them to your vendors on your behalf, whether that's sending a wire transfer, an ACH, some sort of electronic payment, actually issuing the check on your behalf and sending it in the mail for you, or paying them with another form of electronic payment, such as a virtual card, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. The whole idea of payment processing, it really completes the last mile of the AP automation process. So it's sending those payments once you've got the invoices approved and everything. And it really does add a ton of efficiency, reduces fraud for many organizations who are looking to incorporate that into their AP automation solution.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about some of those benefits, it makes a lot of sense. One of the things that really sticks out is that cost per physical check. And maybe I could put this one to you, Tiffany. I mean, in your experience, do organizations sort of understand what those costs are already and are sort of aware of them and feeling that pain, or does it often take some investigation or analysis?
I definitely would say it's a combination. There are certain people that are picking up the phone and saying, hey, I need to figure out the last piece of that puzzle, as Mary just alluded to. And then there are others that really appreciate us digging in deep and helping them figure out how they can be much more efficient and save those additional dollars. I think one of the most important pieces about the automation of the payments is a lot of organizations have done a great job of automating the invoice approval process, that integration back to their ERP application, but that's kind of where it would stop. And then the cash flow management component comes into play. And people really want to stay automated and want to stay digital in reviewing the payment batches, having better control of when they're actually releasing those payments. That's what the payment processing element layers in. Then on top of it, you're saving their time of literally printing checks, stuffing them into envelopes, sealing them and dropping them off at the mailbox. They start to see all of that ROI coming into play, that they can obviously have a better cost control, more efficient use of their resources across that entire department.
Okay, so I wanted to ask about the importance of virtual cards. It's something I've certainly heard spoken about. I know that the KwikTag team has written about it, but can you tell me a little bit more about how they work and why they're important?
One of the things that we have worked with our customers on over the years is really kind of making the most of their time and of their process and making them more efficient, like Tiffany just described. But an area that no matter how efficient your process is, that doesn't get addressed in that is the element of fraud. And that's really where virtual cards come into play. A virtual card works and functions much like a regular credit card. The difference is that it's issued in a one-time use for exactly the amount of the invoice. So say you issue me an invoice for $101.52. If I send you a payment via virtual card, it's going to be for $101.52. You're not going to be able to, like you would have cash a check, you couldn't write on it to change the amount, or not that you would, of course, but others, sometimes this is a risk. 75% of organizations do have virtual cards. Take that out of the equation. It's a single use card exactly for the amount of the invoice. And as a result of that, it can't be saved as a record the way that many hackers would use. They have a list, let's say, of credit card file numbers that they would want to use as potential future payments that they kind of store in their bank of hidden data, so to speak. A virtual card doesn't allow that because it can only be used once for that exact amount. So it really reduces the risk for overpayment and underpayment, and it gives a lot more power to our customers, to the people issuing the payments. Because one of the misconceptions, and we've learned this, research supports this, is that some of the hesitation that companies have about using virtual cards is that if their vendors today say, no, we expect a check or a wire or whatever, as a company, as a client, many of them don't feel like they have the ability to override that, right? To reach out to their vendors and say, hey, it would be really great for us for all the reasons that Tiffany just described and the cost elements we talked about before. If we could pay you in virtual card, it would be much better for us. We might be able to, capture some early pay discounts. We certainly wouldn't worry about things getting lost in the mail, right? We can pay you this way if you'd be open to it. And a lot of organizations feel like they don't have that leverage or negotiating power, when the research also suggests that about 82% of vendors would be willing to accept a payment such as a virtual card if they knew that their payers, the clients, our clients, were looking for that type of flexibility. So it really does put a lot of the purchasing power in the hands of the clients, those that are paying the vendors, and it makes for a very secure payment method that reduces the fraud very significantly for both the issuer and the vendor that's being paid. So it's a really great resource, and it's one of the options that we offer in our payment processing solution as well.
I think one of the most interesting things that I have found as we've layered in the payment processing element is that as a client's overall spend is evaluated, once you look at what vendors and how often you're paying them and what method you're paying, we can cross-reference that against how those vendors are accepting payments for others. So 82% of vendors that are actually accepting virtual cards, we have the ability to be able to share to you and expose, hey, you might be surprised. This vendor is actually already receiving virtual payments. So it's a much simpler transition with a lot of analysis that can be layered in that makes you feel so much better about going down that path.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point, Tiffany.
Stepping back just a bit, when it comes to payment processing and adding payment processing to solutions, when it comes to KwikTag in particular, why is it important that payment processing becomes part of your solutions? Tiffany, do you want to take this one first?
Sure, absolutely. We spoke about it a bit earlier, and it's really that final piece of the puzzle. If we're going to automate the invoice review and approval, we've got all of that documented full audit trail. This really takes it to that next level to ensure truly that you are compliant and you have all your security procedures for review and approval in place for end-to-end automation. The pandemic definitely put us into warp speed in terms of that integration with our software internally, because what it turned into is clients were calling saying, I can't send people into the office to write these checks or print checks, or I'm going to print checks and now I have to go hand deliver checks to my CFO to sign them. So as we have a more remote workforce, the further automation is really just not turned into a if, it's just like it's now a when. How quickly can I get this done and layer in that extra level of automation?
When it comes to your actual clients, can you offer up any stories or any experiences about sort of how the urgency of payment processing has changed, perhaps? I mean, obviously you can imagine with the pandemic that the demand is higher now than maybe it would have been. I don't know, any other stories or any other observations about what your customers are actually going through and how that sort of fits into how you at KwikTag have actually prioritized the payment processing capabilities that you offer? Mary, do you want to take this?
Sure. So, one of the things that we set out to do when we added payment processing to our solution is we wanted to work with a third party who was very familiar, very present, and very well versed in issuing payments on behalf of clients. And so we looked for several months actually for the right partner. And at the end of the process, we selected and chose to work with CSI, Corporate Spending Innovations. And the reason for that is they have 30 years of global B2B payments experience. And so they have all of the layers of security and privacy and audit ability already in place. But more importantly, they also have the ability to issue both Visa and MasterCard as a form of payment for these virtual cards that we've talked about. And that can be really significant because many payment providers only offer one or the other. And as Tiffany mentioned, 82% of vendors are already accepting virtual cards, but some of them only accept one or the other type of payment. So we wanted to be as comprehensive as possible in that. And we didn't want it to be a very costly process for our customers. One of the things that we do is assess who the vendors are that our clients are paying, as Tiffany mentioned a moment ago. And then we work with them to understand what the most optimal method of payment is for all of those vendors for that specific client. And in order to keep costs down, again, people went through a lot of cost analysis as a result of the pandemic. We want to set them up for the greatest amount of success possible going forward as they add in the payment processing to their AP automation solution. So we assess their vendors, we figure out the best way to pay all of their vendors, and we keep the cost to a very, very minimum. And in some cases, there is no cost at all, actually. So it depends on the vendor analysis that we work with them to be part of their solution. So the whole value point is that they have one system where they get the invoices automated and approved and transactions created. And then for those same transactions, they get the visibility of the payment data as well as the fact that we actually issue those payments on their behalf. But that single view in one system is something that customers have been asking us about for quite some time. Tiffany, I'm sure you can probably share some examples.
Absolutely. I love the question about the customer examples and what do we hear. It's all over the map, and it's some really interesting ones that, I learned about. First and foremost, some will come to you and say, hey, they know that there's rebates to be earned if they move their customers to a virtual card. And they know that they likely can do a better job with another service other than their bank. So there's actively seeking how they can generate additional rebates to offset the AP costs. So those are great conversations to have, and vendor analysis comes into play, and we can report back exactly what type of rebate they could expect to have. But on the flip side of that, we also get a client that goes, wait a minute, what do you mean? I'm not going to make the payments. No, I've had a long-standing relationship with my bank for years. Good news is you don't have to change banks. You can leverage the same bank still while we automate that payment processing. So there's a lot of questions that can be, uncovered in those one-on-one dialogues that we have to really educate, any type of company that comes our way. It's really, we've got to determine exactly where they are in that process and how we can engage them to put together the best model. In some cases, just simply being able to trigger a review and approval of their payment batches. I need to be able to continue to see visibility digitally is what a client needs as a first step before they allow CSI to come in and start automating their payments. So, it's really very important to look at each client uniquely to determine what their needs are.
Absolutely. And I'll just add to that, Jason, to kind of pick up on Tiffany's point about where the visibility that they gain in Quick Payables to include whether it's the payment batch review and or the payment processing step itself is we think about this concept now of, spend management. It goes beyond cash flow management. It's really about looking at your spend over a period of time. Again, are you capturing those early paid discounts? Are you looking at where and how you should be spending? Should you be negotiating with your vendors differently for your contracts or your terms because you have this visibility now into who and how you're paying over whatever period of time is necessary? We really want to give people the organizations the most complete view of their spend model so that they can look at their AP automation system and their payment automation system as more than a tool to route their invoices for review and approval or route their payments for review and approval, but really give them access to the decisions that they need to make about how they're going to spend and plan going forward. So it really opens their eyes to the value that it can bring to the organization as well.
Excellent. Before we wrap up, are there any other examples from the GP community that come to mind that have really stood out to you in offering these kinds of services and I guess the benefits of them?
Yeah, we actually, there's several other providers in the space, and we're all good friends in this market, in this community, as I know you can relate to as well, Jason. And everybody does it a little bit differently, but I think we've kind of highlighted a few key things that make the way that KwikTag does it a little bit differently. There's little to no cost associated on behalf of the end user customer. B, they can continue to use their current bank. And C, they're going to get the visibility into when things were paid and how in the same system without logging back into GP, which many GP customers tell us is great because, maybe some of their executive team members in the finance department don't want to log into GP. They just want to see, I just got a call from vendor X. They're really an important partner for us. They asked about the status of their payment, and I was able to find it very quickly in a very easy to use online system that doesn't require me to log into the ERP. So there's certainly benefits that we incorporate in the Quick Payables solution and with the KwikTag products that extend to include payments that are done a little bit differently. But certainly there are other options, and it's really just a matter of how your organization wants to handle their spend management with their vendor payment processing.
I'll add one other piece to that, Mary. I love the summary that you just gave there. One thing that I'm the outstanding service and vendor onboarding process that CSI leverages is, I think, really a game changer in this space as well. So we talked earlier about how people are hesitant, like, oh my goodness, my vendor's never going to accept a virtual card. A lot of that comes to do with, do you have the resources to put into, having people on your AP team manage that vendor onboarding process? And CSI takes that on, but they take that on and they also involve you in the process. Do you have a handful of vendors that need to be handled white glove treatment? Do you have a handful of vendors that you prefer us not to contact? You have the flexibility to really, formulate that onboarding plan to ensure that you can maximize that virtual card for rebates, but also, do I need to handle somebody else slightly a little bit differently? That's okay too.
Interesting stuff. And the benefits there really are, fascinating to kind of go through with you and the journey that some of your customers must take. I know that some of the topics we've mentioned today are also represented in some of the reports that KwikTag has published. I think we can link to a couple of those in the show notes. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I would just say first, of course, Jason, thanks for including us. And Tiffany, it was great to talk through the scenarios with you. And I love getting an additional point of feedback. But I would just say that, for organizations considering adding payments to their AP cycle, definitely educate yourself. And we work with a lot of companies to really just educate them on the process as well, so that you're not going in, to the situation blindly, because there are a lot of different considerations and everybody does do it a little bit differently. So make sure that you're taking into account all of the factors that are relevant for your organizations.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much to both of you for joining me. I hope to talk to you again soon. This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Mary and Tiffany once again for joining. To learn more about QwikTag and the benefits of Quick Payables Accelerate, the cloud-based AP and payment automation solution, visit KwikTag.com. That's KwikTag.com. And that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening. For questions or show ideas, you can get in touch with me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. And make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for all of our updates. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.